The hospital at night had a rhythm all its own. Fluorescent lights hummed softly above the polished floors, their pale glow casting long shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly down the corridors. It was quiet, almost eerily so, except for the distant beeping of heart monitors and the faint echo of a janitor pushing a cart somewhere far away. Emily Turner, a night shift nurse with years of experience etched into her weary eyes, moved with the practiced precision of someone accustomed to being the guardian of life when the rest of the city slept. Her steps were deliberate, her senses tuned to the subtle signals that often mark the difference between a patient surviving the night or slipping into crisis. Then the pager shrieked, a sudden, urgent tone that pierced the stillness. Code from room 312. Emily's heart jumped. She recognized the room immediately. She had walked its perimeter countless times, checking vitals, adjusting medications, offering a steady hand to patients who relied on her vigilance. But as she rushed down the hallway, adrenaline surging, a cold unease began to settle in. Something about the silence felt wrong. The usual beeping of a bedside monitor, the faint rustle of hospital linens, none of it was there. Emily reached room 312 and pushed the door open, expecting to see the patient, maybe a nurse attending to him, some explanation for the urgent alert. Instead, the room was empty. The bed was made neatly, the sheets taut and undisturbed. The monitors hung silent, their screens dark and lifeless. For a moment, she froze, her training struggling to reconcile what her eyes were seeing. Her radio crackled. Emily, are you at 312? The bed was occupied. The voice of her colleague sounded calm, almost reassuring, yet every instinct screamed that something was terribly off. She stepped fully into the room, her gaze sweeping from the neatly stacked blankets to the lifeless monitors to the chair in the corner where a nurse would normally be perched during a late-night observation. Nothing. Silence pressed against her chest. A shiver ran down her spine as the corridor outside seemed to stretch into shadow, the dim fluorescent lights flickering as though reacting to her growing panic. Emily had faced cardiac arrests, seizures, and sudden collapses. She had held hands, whispered words of comfort, and administered life-saving interventions countless times. But nothing in her experience had prepared her for a room that should be occupied, but was not. And then everything changed. A faint sound, almost imperceptible at first, came from the direction of the nurse's station. The soft hum of a monitor. A faint rustle of sheets. Emily's heartbeat raced as she turned back toward the hallway, her pulse echoing in her ears louder than the faint mechanical noises. Could it be a malfunction? A delayed alert? Rational explanations fought to assert themselves, but the raw, visceral fear clung stubbornly, refusing to be ignored. Every instinct screamed danger, yet there was no danger she could see. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the pager again, half expecting another code, half expecting it all to vanish entirely. In that suspended moment, the hospital felt transformed. Familiar spaces became strange, shadows thickened, and the world of medicine, precise, controlled, predictable, slipped away, leaving only uncertainty. Emily Turner, a seasoned nurse, felt the unnerving thrill of the inexplicable. The night had begun like any other, routine and ordered, but now it held a question with no immediate answer, one that would haunt her and the viewers long after the lights came back to normal. The stage was set. The hospital, a sanctuary of life and care, had revealed a secret that defied logic, and the story of what happened next, of fear, mystery, and the limits of understanding, was only beginning. As the night deepened, the camera pulls back from the empty corridors to reveal the patients who populate the hospital's quiet wards, each one a fragile story of life teetering on the edge. Among them is John Whitaker, a 62-year-old man whose presence dominates Emily Turner's night shift. John has advanced cardiac disease, a heart that falters unpredictably, prone to arrhythmias that can strike without warning, oxygen levels that dip dangerously low, and a body that betrays him even as he fights to survive. To the untrained eye, he might appear merely frail, but every subtle twitch, every shallow breath tells Emily that the line between life and death is thin razor. Emily moves through her rounds with meticulous care, checking monitors, adjusting IV drips, and listening for the faintest irregularities in a heartbeat. She explains to the audience in simple, empathetic terms the nature of John's condition. The heart's electrical system is erratic, prone to sudden failure, and even minor stress can trigger life threatening events. But beyond the medical explanation, there is the human story, the exhaustion etched on John's face, the fear that flickers when he imagines the next moment, the quiet bravery required just to lie still while his body betrays him. Emily's narration emphasizes the intimate knowledge nurses acquire, the faint lift of an eyebrow, the subtle twitch of a finger, a brief change in breathing pattern, all sign that the body is signaling distress before machines detect it. It is during these moments that Emily's intuition, honed over years of night shifts, often overrides protocol. She recalls instances where a patient's vitals seemed stable, but a gut feeling told her something was off. On more than one occasion, this instinct saved lives. Quick intervention, subtle adjustments, or a rapid response call prevented tragedies that might have gone unnoticed in daylight chaos. The camera lingers on her hands adjusting monitors, her eyes scanning numbers and charts, her presence both calm and vigilant. The audience senses the weight of responsibility she bears. Nursing at night is an exercise in perpetual alertness, where one small oversight can become catastrophic. Her voice carries both reverence and exhaustion, explaining that for patients like John, a single night can hold more risk than days filled with procedures, medications, and rounds. The narrative highlights the paradox of the hospital night shift, serenity on the surface, but beneath a simmering tension, a constant vigil for lives balanced on fragile wires. Through anecdotes and careful explanation, viewers not only understand the mechanics of John's heart condition, but the emotional landscape of those who care for him. Emily's empathy bridges science and humanity, helping the audience grasp the fragility, the constant danger, and the profound responsibility of nurses navigating the unknown. These early nights of observation and connection set the stage for the strange, inexplicable phenomena that will intrude on their routine. A reminder that even in medicine, certainty is sometimes. As she steps back into the hallway, the pager vibrates again. Emily hesitates, staring down the long, dim corridor. Her instincts tell her to retreat, to call for help, to rationalize. Yet, curiosity, duty, and a strange, unexplainable pull drive her forward. Every shadow, every flicker of light, every unexpected sound becomes a question. What is real, and what lies beyond the boundaries of her understanding? The night has shifted from routine to something uncanny, leaving her, and the audience, haunted by the first of many encounters that will defy explanation, blending medical reality with the unsettling presence of the unknown. Determined not to dismiss what she had witnessed, Emily Turner began documenting every anomaly with meticulous care. Each flicker of a monitor, every inexplicable alarm, every shadow that seemed to move just beyond the corner of her eye was noted in her log, alongside timestamps, room numbers, and her own emotional reactions. She reviewed the hospital security footage repeatedly. The grainy black and white images showed fleeting forms, subtle distortions, shapes that appeared for a fraction of a second and vanished the moment she focused on them. Nothing concrete, nothing that could fully explain the experiences. Yet the unease lingered, growing heavier with every night shift. Emily spoke with colleagues, testing her own perception against theirs. Surprisingly, she found she was not alone. Other nurses reported strange occurrences, doors opening on their own, monitors briefly displaying erratic readings that disappeared when checked, and alarms triggered from empty rooms. Even the seasoned night shift staff, hardened by years of hospital nights, admitted to moments of inexplicable tension, the kind that prickled the skin and made them question what they thought they knew. Each story added layers to the mystery, validating Emily's experience while deepening the sense that something beyond the ordinary was unfolding. Medical records and patient logs were scrutinized for inconsistencies. John Whitaker's bed in room 312 was checked again and again, The documentation confirmed that he had been resting safely in his room that night, observed by Emily herself. The room where the alarm had sounded, where monitors had flickered, where the presence of a patient had been implied, was empty. Every record corroborated the impossibility. Emily's rational mind strained to reconcile the evidence with what she had felt, an unsettling tension between professional logic and lived experience. To explore the phenomenon further, experts were consulted. Physicians discussed the limitations of hospital technology, misfiring alarms, transient electrical anomalies, and human error could account for some irregularities. Administrators considered procedural inconsistencies, while a medical psychologist examined the effects of fatigue, stress, and the hallucinatory possibilities that come with long, isolating night shifts. Each explanation offered pieces of the puzzle, yet none fully satisfied. None could explain the visceral, almost tangible sensation Emily described. The feeling of being watched, the sudden drop in temperature, the impossible knowledge that a patient seemed to occupy a room that was physically empty. Emotionally, the investigation took its toll. Emily's confidence wavered as the line between perception and reality blurred. Frustration and unease became constant companions, shadows lurking at the edges of every hallway. The audience feels her struggle, a professional committed to science and observation, now faced with events that defy empirical understanding. The narrative emphasizes her internal conflict. She wants answers, seeks logic, but cannot deny the experience that feels so profoundly real. This period of investigation deepens the story's tension, inviting viewers to step alongside Emily, weighing explanations, questioning assumptions, and experiencing the slow, creeping realization that not all events within the hospital can be neatly categorized. The mystery has grown, and the emotional stakes are higher than ever. The ordinary hospital night, so familiar and routine, has become a labyrinth of shadows, uncertainty, and haunting questions, setting the stage for the personal and psychological toll that is yet to come. As the night stretched on, the mystery began to weigh heavily, not just on Emily Turner, but on the entire night shift team. The hospital, usually a place of routine and control, had become a theater of unease. Sleep deprivation compounded the stress. The relentless vigilance required to monitor fragile patients like John Whitaker left little space for rest or reflection. Emily began to notice subtle changes in herself, moments of heightened anxiety, fleeting doubts, and a quiet tension that followed her long after her shift ended. Her family, perceptive to the shifts in her demeanor, commented on the haunted look in her eyes, the late-night phone calls that were unanswered, the way she seemed to carry a weight too heavy to share. Emily's colleagues experienced similar strain. Nurses whispered about fleeting glimpses of shadows, monitors that spiked without cause, and alarms triggered from empty rooms. Even the seasoned night shift staff, hardened by years of hospital nights, admitted to moments of inexplicable tension, the kind that prickled the skin and made them question what they thought they knew. Each story added layers to the mystery, validating Emily's experience while deepening the sense that something beyond the ordinary was unfolding. Interwoven with this tension was the impact on patient care. Emily remained fiercely committed to her duties, yet the emotional burden was palpable. The camera lingers on her hands adjusting monitors, her eyes scanning vital signs with both vigilance and quiet fear. Moments of doubt crept in. Has she missed something critical? Was a patient truly safe? Even as she reassured herself with facts and protocols, the unexplainable occurrences gnawed at her confidence. This emotional strain illuminated the delicate balance of night shift nursing. The human body is predictable in its biology, yet the mind is vulnerable to the weight of uncertainty. Patients, too, became part of this emotional tapestry. Families noticed the subtle shifts in Emily's behavior and worried for her well-being. They sensed the tension between professional composure and personal unease, a dissonance that only intensified the haunting nature of the nights. The documentary reflects on how caregivers bear not only the physical responsibility of their patients, but the emotional toll of confronting the unknown. Viewers feel the pressure building, the invisible weight pressing down,
the constant vigilance required to navigate a world where science meets the unexplainable. Cinematic techniques underscore the psychological impact. Slow pans through dimly lit corridors, isolated nurses moving between rooms, the echo of distant alarms. Emily's voiceover shares her introspective thoughts, blending self-reflection with raw emotion. Vulnerability and resilience coexist in her narrative, reminding the audience that even the most experienced professionals are human. The haunting tension of these nights, the intersection of duty, fear, and mystery, create a space where viewers empathize deeply, sensing the emotional cost of a world where life and the unexplainable collide. By the end of this section, the audience is immersed in the human stakes. The mystery is no longer just about empty rooms or flickering monitors. It is about the profound psychological and emotional impact on those who navigate the front lines of life, death, and the unexplainable. Emily Turner's journey is no longer only medical, it is deeply personal, haunting, and undeniably human. It was a night that would haunt Emily Turner forever. The hospital, already a place of shadow and whispered tension, seemed to tighten around her, corridors narrowing, lights flickering more violently than ever before, each pulse of the fluorescent bulbs casting grotesque shadows across walls and floors. The familiar hum of monitors had taken on a sinister cadence, a mechanical heartbeat that synchronized with her own. She moved with purpose, yet every step carried the weight of anticipation, fear, and uncertainty. That night, the strange occurrences escalated beyond anything she or the staff had ever witnessed. The first alarm shattered the stillness. Room 312 again. Emily grabbed her pager, heart racing, and ran toward the source. As she approached, monitors in neighboring rooms began to flicker, numbers spiking and dipping erratically. The beds themselves seemed to shiver, as though sensing her presence, as though the very walls breathed with a hidden life. Emily stepped into room 312 expecting chaos, expecting a patient in distress. But again, nothing. The bed was empty, monitors dark. Yet the alarm persisted, insistent, demanding acknowledgement. Her rational mind struggled to reconcile the contradiction. The room was empty, yet it screamed life, danger, urgency. Then as she backed into the hallway, the chaos spread. Alarms from adjacent wings blared in a cascading symphony of confusion. Monitors across the ward spiked, and doors creaked open without human touch. The camera follows her in real time, weaving between wings, capturing the surreal tension. Nurses rushing, machines reacting independently, the echo of distant hurried footsteps that belonged to no one. Emily's own breaths came in shallow, rapid gasps, each one punctuated by the metallic beep of instruments that should have been silent. The hospital had become a living organism, unpredictable, threatening, and undeniably.
A patient's absence and the vitals' wild fluctuations created a terrifying paradox, life threatened by forces beyond the measurable, beyond the predictable. Every shadow seemed to hold movement. A fleeting silhouette appeared at the end of a corridor, vanishing before Emily could focus on it. Beds shifted subtly, as if bearing invisible weight. Doors slammed, alarms shrieked, and monitors continued their erratic dance. Yet amidst this, Emily acted with a calm born of experience, racing from room to room, each action measured, precise, professional. Though her hands trembled slightly and her pulse raced, she was a nurse at war with the inexplicable, straddling the boundary between the known and the unknowable. Emotionally, this night pushed the audience to the edge of suspense. Viewers feel Emily's fear, her determination, and the crushing weight of responsibility pressing against the backdrop of a hospital transformed into something uncanny. Every heartbeat, every alarm, every fleeting shadow intensifies the mystery. Rationality fights to assert itself, but instinct, fear, and the undeniable evidence of what cannot be explained dominates. The narrative crescendos in a tense blend of action and reflection, drawing viewers into a world where the familiar and the supernatural coexist, teasing the boundary between perception and reality. By the end of the night,
Emily emerges physically exhausted but unbroken. Yet the memory of that shift, the empty rooms, the erratic monitors, the fleeting shadows, the impossible readings, stays with her, a haunting reminder that even in the clinical precision of medicine, there are forces, events, and mysteries that defy explanation. The stage is now set for reflection, for understanding, and for questions that have no answers, lingering long after the chaos has ended. The first light of dawn crept into the hospital, pale and hesitant, illuminating empty corridors that had been theaters of inexplicable chaos just hours before. Emily Turner sat alone in the nurse's lounge, hands wrapped around a warm cup of coffee, trying to steady the tremor in her fingers and the whirlwind of thoughts in her mind. The night had left its mark. Monitors that had danced with impossible readings, alarms that had screamed from empty rooms, beds that seemed alive, and shadows that defied logic. She felt the weight of the event settle over her, heavy and unshakable, a quiet acknowledgement that some mysteries refuse resolution. Experts weigh in, and their voices echo across the narrative, offering insight without resolution. Physicians explain the limitations of medical technology, the rare glitches that can mimic life, the quirks of electrical systems, and the fallibility of human perception when fatigue and stress collide. Psychologists discuss the mind's capacity to perceive patterns, to find meaning in chaos, and to experience what is sometimes called collective delusion in high-stress environments. Spiritual scholars and consciousness researchers speak of phenomena beyond the physical, near-death experiences, and the delicate boundary between life and the unknown. Yet even with all this expertise, no single explanation satisfies. The events remain in the liminal space between medical science and the unexplained, leaving Emily and the audience with questions rather than answers. Emotionally, the scene is one of contemplation and melancholy. Emily reflects on her journey, acknowledging both the terror and the responsibility she bears. She recalls John Whitaker and other patients, their lives intertwined with her own vigilance. She understands that while science can guide and protect, it cannot always explain the experiences that live in the margins of understanding. The camera lingers on her face, capturing the mixture of relief, sorrow, and awe. A professional whose competence meets the inexplicable. A human caught between reason and wonder. The lingering question resonates. Could there be aspects of human consciousness or phenomena within the hospital environment that remain beyond the reach of medicine? How does one reconcile rigorous training, empirical knowledge, and the undeniable experiences that defy rational explanation? Emily's reflections invite the audience to consider that life, even in its most clinical, monitored, and measured spaces, contains mysteries that may never be solved. The story does not close with tidy answers. It remains open, haunting, and evocative. As the camera slowly pans through the empty corridors, bathed in the soft light of morning, the hospital feels both familiar and otherworldly. Every shadow, every silent monitor, every quiet room holds the memory of what transpired during the night, a testament to events that challenge understanding and ignite curiosity. Emily rises, ready to face another shift, carrying with her the knowledge that some experiences, profound, unsettling, and beautiful in their mystery, remain unexplainable, yet shape the very essence of those who witness them. The audience is left suspended in this space between clarity and uncertainty, reflecting on the fragile balance of life, the limits of science, and the haunting possibility that not all that occurs in the hospital is meant to be understood.